Welcome to our fifth episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. Today we have our first international visitor, Miss Claire Dupuis from Meaux, France. Claire, how are you today?
Hey, Daniel, how are you doing?
Doing very well. Thank you for coming on. You're the first non-trainer, I guess, that I have, although you kind of are a trainer. So your expertise is in saddle fitting. So I'm interested to get into that with you here in a little bit. We'll start off with our lightning round questions for points. So these are meant to be short answer, informal, just kind of break the ice sort of stuff. What is your favorite way to relax?
Riding horses, maybe.
Morning or evening?
That's a tough one. It's a really tough one. For riding horses, morning, definitely.
Bay or sorrel?
Oh, shit. I love both. I have both. I love both. I can't answer that.
No problem. Okay, so you had told me that your family was having pizza tonight, so this one is fitting. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Not really.
Okay, that's a big controversy here in the U.S.
I know. I heard about that.
Maybe one day I'll have an Italian on and we'll get them into a big cussing stream when I bring that.
Oh, question. Gosh. Yeah. Be careful with that.
Do you have a horse-related pet peeve?
Oh, I have a lot. Okay, this one is funny. The rope holders that everybody uses, the rope, just rope holders. Here in France, people absolutely want to call those things ethological halters. Ethology is the science that studies animal behavior. Okay, and so so what you guys would call more or less natural horsemanship or any variation of that in the US, in France, we call it ethology, oriented riding, whatever. And so the rope halter, French people absolutely want to call them ethological halters, which is ridiculous. It's just a halter made of rope, and that drives me absolutely insane.
Okay. What's your favorite beverage?
Diet pop.
Very Okay.
Yeah. I had a pretty bad addiction to Diet Coke that I picked up when I lived in very briefly, I spent a year in the US as an exchange student in Virginia, which is where I picked up the accent that you probably hear right now. And I also picked up a pretty bad addiction for Diet Coke. And at my worst, at my peak, I was having at least a six pack or more a day, cans, little cans. That was pretty bad because even though, this is sugar free, but you got all the aspartame and whatever other shit in there. So that was not very healthy. So I quit. Cold turkey. I completely quit for a couple of years. And then I worked my way back up. And now I enjoy a couple of cans a day. But I'm not doing the six pack anymore. I promise.
I think that stuff is only slightly less addictive than heroin. I really do.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Tell us something unexpected about you.
Unexpected? Oh my God, I don't know. I don't know because with knowing me, I expect just about anything.
I'm kind of thinking that too, but the audience doesn't have any idea who you are. So couture fashion or photography, what do you think is the curveball no one would see coming?
Oh, yeah, maybe the couture thing, because when I used to live in the Paris area and I worked at the Paris airport, which is number 6 biggest airport in the world. It's a very, very big facility. And I worked there as a ramp dispatch for about 10 years. And then we moved out of the, Paris area and we came here. We are smack in the center of France, actually. We're in the geographical center of France. And employment is a big deal here. It's the rate of unemployment is very, very high. And I couldn't find a job. Even after 2 years, sending like over 100 resumes, I could not find a job. So I had to sign up for like a new training, and I was going to be trained to actually be a seamstress and do some sewing, because we have some couture companies here that still, survive. And so I did that for a little bit. And that was very, very unexpected. Yeah, I never expected that. Working in a factory in front of a behind a sewing machine, I never expected that.
Some of these I designed more for guys, I guess, but I'll just continue on. What superpower would you choose?
I don't know, killing with a look, maybe.
Okay. Something tells me you have that ability already, but maybe
Sort
not.
of, sort of.
Thoughts or feelings? So are you more a cerebral, analytical thinker, or
Oh no, I'm a gut person. I'm a gut person, definitely.
do you have a favorite piece of tack or horse-related tool?
Yeah, I have a fetish for my saddle. My saddle, I told my husband if I were to die tomorrow, I want to be buried with it, you know.
Okay. Do you want to tell us what that is? I know you've been through a bunch of them. So which one?
Yeah, well, for it's now my profession. So I buy saddles, I buy used saddles, I kind of pin them up and make them make sure that everything is safe and in place and everything, make them beautiful and resell them. That's my current job. And I've had a couple of hundred already under my belt. And this one I've had for 3 years, and nothing has replaced it in my heart so far. So it's and amusingly enough, it's built on an Equiflex tree. And I know that some people, the Equiflex tree tends to paralyze riders a lot. Some people love them, some people hate them. So personally, being rather lightweight, I love them. And so it's a Pullman saddle built on an Equiflex tree. And I believe it's a custom piece because I've never seen the like of it. I think it was done probably for a customer, and I was lucky enough to be able to buy it secondhand. And I've recently had my saddle maker, because I work, in collaboration with a saddle maker. And I recently had him entirely kind of furbish it you applied a brand new layer of Vaseline, so now it's all nice and shiny. And I actually took my first ride in it this morning, ever since it came back from the saddle maker, and I love that thing with a passion.
I have an old ML Letty saddle that's about as old as I am, and it's kind of the same way. It's like a favorite pair of blue jeans.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite book or movie?
Oh yeah, actually a really really big movie buff. My husband and I, we watch tons and tons of movies. We watch just about anything that is released. And as you know, my favorite movie is Fight Club by David Fincher. Yeah, my daughter is actually named after the female character of that movie, even though that female character is maybe not a role model for a 13-year-old girl, but that's what she's named after. Fabulous movie. Yeah.
I recently watched that with my sons. Yeah, it's one of those that you should watch it every 5 years, whether you need to or not, for sure. Is there a preventable question or problem that you get sick of answering or dealing with that you just wish everybody would figure this out and we'd put it to bed and never have to deal with it again?
Oh, there are lots of them. There are lots of them. Pertaining to saddle fitting, yeah, absolutely. I get asked over and over again. Okay, I'll give you an example. The one is, okay, I have a 3-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, whatever, and should I buy a good saddle for this horse because they're gonna grow and change? And I'm like, do you buy clothes for your kids?
Mm-hmm.
Do you buy clothes for your kids that are relative to their age and shape that they have now, or do you buy them clothes for when they're gonna hit the 18-year-old mark? Yeah. Obviously you're gonna saddle up this horse in a saddle that fits him now, not when he's older. So
very true, very true. Riding with a saddle that doesn't fit is a sure recipe for hurting one.
Yeah, amusingly, I'm in the process. I'm almost done, but I'm in the process of starting one at the moment. I'm starting a 3-year-old filly for friends of mine, and I'm starting this filly and it's fun. It's a nice adventure. I'm doing it with my daughter. My daughter is 13-year-old, so she's helped me starting my stud that we started last year, and now she's helping me starting this one. And it's crazy because being a saddle fitter, you would think, and I have a lot of saddles at home that I can try, and this one I had to go through maybe 6 or 7 saddles that before I found one that I could actually safely ride her in, because she was unbalanced and uncomfortable, and it added to her already pretty emotive nature and worried nature, and that really played a part in having me bucked off, namely. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So a little bit of a left-hand turn to loosen things up. What is your favorite dinosaur?
The T-Rex. Who else?
Okay. Small arms dealer. Very good. Have you ever had a UFO encounter?
Nope.
Okay.
Never.
Well, we've come to the end of the questions, and I'm going to award you 92 points. That's the most anyone has gotten to date. So very good.
Oh my God. That's pretty cool.
Okay. Well, now that we've broken the ice, why don't you give us a little bit of the background of Claire Dupuis and what your horse experience or other relevant experience might be and the journey you've been on.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'm 52 years old at the moment. I have this one daughter that I've mentioned before, and I've been riding horses and ponies and donkeys probably since, I don't know if it was before I could walk, but probably at the same time. And it was pretty unlikely because I was born and raised in the very center of Paris, France. Okay, the capital of France. So you don't think horses and horseback riding when you think the posh areas in Paris, right?
Mhm.
It's not the first thing that comes to your mind. But there was this kind of park. We have several park in Paris, not as large as Central Park, but we have a few ones. And when I was, and back in the 70s, they still had, guys with like donkeys and ponies or whatever to give little rides to little kids, and my grandmother would take me there nearly every day, and I would get my little pony or donkey ride nearly every day, and I was like maybe 2 years old, and I never grew out of that. That stayed with me. So I started taking formal riding lessons, not so early on. Actually, I was 9 when I got my very first formal riding lesson on horses. Amusingly enough, when I was a little kid, I would always want to have the taller horses possible. And now that I'm 52, I want the shorter horse possible. I'm actually getting into ponies at the moment. So I'm not as brave as I was when I was a kid, I suppose. And when I was 12, through my father and one of my father's friends, I was introduced to the handful of people who really were the first people to bring the Western way of riding in France, because we never had that before. I think probably before the 70s and the 80s, that was completely unheard of in France. We had no quarter horses, no American breed, no American saddles, none of that. It was all, the classical, the French masters of classical riding, pretty much. Mm-hmm. And when I was 12, I got acquainted with the riding Western, and I completely fell in love with that. It was a different approach, and I stuck with that ever since.
That brings up an interesting question. So what type of horse would you say do you commonly have there in France? Is it more the warm blood types or the Spanish types in dressage, or what's your average, horse?
Yeah, it's all kind of saddle breeds. We have a French saddlebred, and then we have all the breeds that come from either for show jumping or dressage. We have all the breeds that come from Germany and the Netherlands. So all the warm bloods, the Dutch bloods, the whatever. At the moment now we have a lot of Spanish and Portuguese horses also, but that's a pretty recent trend. Probably I would say 15 years, 30 years back, we didn't have all those Spanish horses. That's rather, it's not super recent, but I don't remember that as a kid. And we have a national breed. We have a French pacer, and they have changed quite a bit too, but we had a lot of that. In all the riding schools and stuff, you would get a lot of the French pacer. So they at the time, they have changed since, but at the time they were very tall, kind of skinny looking, and they had long ugly heads, and and the prominent withers, and now they have introduced some American thoroughbred in that, so that has changed quite a bit. Yeah. And right. and the friend of my father was mentioning, I think he was one of the very, very first to import an actual quarter horse in France. I think actually his horse, who was named Janis Bar, and I think he was the first quarter horse ever imported in France, and we share the same year of birth. That horse was born 1969, and I think it was the very first quarter horse imported in France. and he lived happily in France till the age of probably 30. So and now we have a pretty good quarter horse industry here. They are quite popular now.
Mm-hmm. The discipline you're most closely related with is actually reining at this point. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. My discipline of choice, and it's funny because I have a love-hate relationship with reining. That we may go into that further a little bit down the road, but yeah, that is the one discipline that, as many times as I walk away from it, and I'm like, oh no, I'm done with that. I want to do something else, and this is just not for me, and la la la. But I always go back to it, always. And since the last maybe 5-10 years, we have a new big interest for all the disciplines involving cattle. This is becoming increasingly popular. That and all what they call the kind of cowboy trail or mountain trail, all the obstacle courses that are not indoor trail with all the just the poles on the ground, but all the more like natural ranch trail, mountain trail, whatever. This is becoming very popular as well. But reining is like the dressage of the Western world. It's like, I don't even know why they invented Western dressage. I mean, who needs Western dressage? Sorry for the Western dressage, fans, but to me, reining is the real Western dressage.
What about, because I do know you fairly well. We've known each other for a few years now. You've got
7 years actually. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Do we have an anniversary I'm unaware of, or when? So you also have a pretty strong background in dog training. Do you want to tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, I was pretty involved with Belgian Malinois for a little bit. But I had one, and I was training it for bite work and doing a few little low level competitions, and really that's something that I miss a lot. I may go back to that at some point. Maybe if horses get too expensive or take too much time, or as I'm getting older or whatever, I may go back to doing that at some point, because it's really something that was really, really dear to my heart. It was very fun. It was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed that. But so I started out with work line, Belgian Malinois. And then, because I'm a very visually oriented person and I like everything beautiful, I turned to the show bloodlines, which are quite different. It's like in Arabians, you're going to have the endurance Arabians who are very different from the show ring Arabians. Mm-hmm. And then the quarter horses, the halter or bloodlines are going to be very different from the, racing or reining bloodlines, whatever. Mm-hmm. So the Malinois, it's the same situation. There is a very, very strong, too strong actually, dichotomy and split between the working lines and the show lines. And I started out with one, but I pretty quickly switched to the next. And I was a very, very successful show Malinois breeder for 10 years. And after 10 years, I was actually so successful that it's lonely at the top. Casey Deary has this mare called Lonely at the Top. That's true. When you've reached the top in any given discipline, it's very hard. I think it's harder to stay at the top than to get to the top, because when you're trying to get to the top, you have that hunger and you're the underdog, and so that gives you a lot of leeway, a lot of freedom in what you're doing. But when you're at the top, everybody wants to get you down from there, and it gets really harder to stay motivated and to just keep shining and keep being on top of there. So I bred quote unquote only for 10 years, which is actually very short, because mm-hmm. successful breeders, they have like 20-30 years career normally. It's not something that you build on the snap of the fingers. It takes time. So my raise to the top quote unquote was very fast. I bred very successful dogs for 10 years, and then I kind of retired from that within a year or two, and I was done with it completely. And now I have mutts from the Humane Society. I have 2 dogs who are rescues. They are mutts. They don't listen to nothing, so it's pretty funny when and I have a friend who's telling me, but how do you do it? You've had the most beautiful dogs in the world. You have the best trained dogs in the world. And now you have two mongrels, that don't even come when you call them. That's pretty ironic. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine with that. That's good.
We have a border collie that my wife has claimed, and kind of like the Malinois, border collies tend to be very intense and very intelligent.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And most of the border collies I've known, you can't hardly touch. They're never petted. They tend to be very skittish. And my wife has turned this thing into an absolute useless lap dog.
Oh my God, this is fabulous.
He's nothing like any border collie I've ever known. But anyway.
All right, good. Well done.
Well, I bring up the dogs because I always find that people with a background in dogs fit very well into the horse business. They already have an understanding of true behavioral theory and principles, and particularly with the Malinois, one of the biggest issues we have with horse people is that when they start out, they tend to get intimidated by the horses. But you would have the same issue with Malinois. Not many people have really been around a truly strong dog like that you really have to watch and be in control of. So I think anybody that comes in with a background like that has they're going to save themselves a few years of learning, just because
it was certainly an asset, definitely. But then it was a two-edged sword for me, because it literally took me several years to be able to figure out what motivated horses, because it is so different from what motivates dogs, because and I know we've had previous conversations about that, because to me they were so different. I was like, shit, why can I get that done with a horse? I can nearly teach a dog to read and write almost, and why cannot I get some simple things done with a horse? But because they are so different. The dog, and namely like the border collie or the Australian heeler or the Malinois, any kind of working dog, they will jump through fire just to be able to do something with you and work with you, and they want to interact and they want to partake, and they are the interaction is their sheer motivation. You nearly don't need to give them anything else, because the mere fact of doing something with you is very motivating. And it took me literally years to figure out that the biggest reward you can give a horse is to throw it back in the pasture and walk away from it and do nothing with it. And that was like, it was impossible for me to wrap my brains around and it took me like probably 3-4 years to actually come to peace with that and be okay with that and learn to use it and as a very, very powerful tool. Because now, when I am doing like a schooling session and my horse does something that I really have been trying to get to and he does it well, I literally jump off and I undo the cinch and I go tie him up and leave him alone, and that's his like big reward. Like, oh yes, you did the right thing. The human comes off and leaves you alone. And it is so the polar opposite of what makes a dog tick, that it was an asset to be into animal training. Definitely. I had some concept, but that very big difference was extremely hard for me to overcome.
I understand what you mean. That's one of the things that we have a lot as a clinician. People are always chasing this connection with their horse, and always, if I'm being candid, the thought in the back of my head is you just need to get a dog, because you can connect with a dog in a way you're never going to connect with a horse. They just are not wired that way.
Absolutely. But that's human, and I know exactly what you're talking about. All those people, the horse just did something well. They want to rush to it, hug it, pet on it, talk to it, and the horse, and that's not what's going to reward the horse. You want to reward the horse, back off, go away, leave him alone for like 2-3 minutes. That's the true reward. And it is so hard for humans to do. So hard.
Agreed. Well, you've mentioned Marla and your husband. You want to tell us a little bit about your family? Marla's 13 and named after a psychopathic woman in a movie. So how does that work out?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, she's doing pretty well for what she's been named after. She's she's very gentle. She's a very kind soul, I think. And it's fascinating, because I'm bringing her into my horsemanship journey. And that's pretty special. I don't know if your sons do the horses with you. I know they are into cattle a little bit. I know they've
Mhm.
been showing their cattle and stuff. That's pretty cool. Mala, of course, she's been riding horses, ponies and stuff since she was almost a baby. But for the past maybe 2 years, she's really gotten into it. And I am amazed at what she can do at 13 of age, and the feel she has, the timing she has, the understanding she has. It makes me very, very hopeful for this new generation that is coming. Because what I know now at 52, and I don't know shit, I'm just a backyard owner who happens to train a little bit more than the average owner, because I have access to a little bit more horses, because I am lucky enough to have friends who trust me with some of their young horses. So I have access to some young horses that I can play with. But otherwise, I'm just basically a backyard owner. So I don't have any specific talent or skill but I've done a lot of research. I'm a very, very avid learner, as you know, and I've spent literally thousands of hours just researching that stuff because I'm fascinated. And I've spent, nights overnight, not sleeping, and thinking about how can I do this with this horse? Why is this one doing that? I'm kind of obsessed with it. So all of that to say that now I have kind of a little background of knowledge that I'm carrying with me. And I'm like, shit, if I had that when I was 13 or when I was 20, I would have been a completely, different horse person, and I would have been so much better. So the ability for today's kids, and I'm not a unique case at all. There are a lot of people who are getting a little bit more skilled and a little bit more knowledgeable, and they are giving that to their kids. So this new generation has it pretty much, pre-chewed, so to speak, because they have access to all this knowledge that we did not have 40 years ago.
Mhm.
We can't, whatever how you want to, however you want to name it, but I will name it for the sake of simplicity. Natural horsemanship was not what, 50, 40 years ago, we did not have what we have now. And those kids, they have access to that now. And it's maybe not mainstream yet, but it's getting there. It will be mainstream at some point. So what a fantastic improvement in the life of horses for the generations to come, I think.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think there is a change coming. It's very, very slow coming, and we are going to kind of quote unquote mistreat yet a few generations of horses, unfortunately, because I think the humans over history have been pretty unfair in the way they have treated horses and approached horses for centuries and centuries, unfortunately, because we didn't have this knowledge. A few individuals had this knowledge, but it was not mainstream. But now that it is becoming more and more mainstream, and science is helping too, because now we have neurology, for example, who is giving us such incredible insight in the horse's mind and how animals learn, and the better ways to get them to be okay with what we ask of them. So these kids that are now 10, 15, 20, I think they are so lucky.
I agree. I think another aspect that can't be underestimated is video. Just the fact that you can have someone so easily video you and go back and watch what you just did. And I felt something here. What was that really? And so forth. That's just a tremendous tool that can save people so much time. And now everybody walks around with a video recorder in their pocket.
Yeah, I tried that. I made a little clip for my business and my customers no later than this morning, just showing them how to tie up a horse and have it, disengage his hind and change eyes, just that very basic thing, back and forth. And yeah, years ago, we would not have been able to so easily share information, share knowledge with others in such a simple fashion. It's like 3 minutes clip, but if it can help others, that, great. And the internet has completely turned this entire industry upside down too, because I would never have been able to be in touch with you, for example, or the other long distance, people who have helped me over the years, if not for the internet. Before you had to go to the local riding school, and if it was a great one, well, you were lucky. But if it was a lame one, a poor one, you had a poor instructor, well, you were poor too.
Yeah.
So that has changed so much.
What would you say you at least as I have known you, you have predominantly been starting young horses and riding them for a year or two and then kind of trading them off and starting another one. What is your favorite part of that journey, or is that more by happenstance? Would you rather be riding a 17-year-old fully finished training horse, or what stage of that journey is your favorite part?
Well, the more I go and the younger I tend to address and approach them, and I would completely be bored to death with a finished reining horse, because I have this kind of, we all have this kind of fantasy that we don't really want to make true. So I'm like, okay, if I could only buy myself a 50,000, euros reining horse. But it's not true. I wouldn't know what to do with it. Yeah, sure, I'd go and show it and maybe I'd be successful on it, but I don't think I would get half the thrills I get starting colts. I am absolutely fascinated and obsessed. And I think we share this. Mm-hmm. I'm absolutely fascinated and obsessed with the equine mind and how they learn and how to build this relationship with them and how to have a quality. I want to have an equine that can do stuff for me, but not be troubled for it. There is that Bug Brannaman quote when Bug says, I'm not interested in what a horse can do. I'm only interested in what the horse can do untroubled. And I fully 200% agree with that. So I see a lot of finished reining horses around me that can do amazing things. They are amazing athletes, but a lot of them are very, very troubled, and I wouldn't want that. I'm not interested, Yeah. I'm genuinely not interested in performance. If this performance is given in a troubled state of mind, I just don't want it. It's worthless to me.
I know what you mean. There's a lot of those show horses that have that nobody's home look in their eyes, and
it literally breaks my heart, and there are so many levels, there are so many discussions here. Like, I don't know, I love all the first times. What's incredible when you're starting colts is that, well, it's never had a halter and now it's had one. It's never had a saddle and now it can be saddled. It's never been nobody ever sat on them and now you're sitting on them, and there is this very, really sweet one particular moment I truly love is when you go for your first trail ride by yourself alone on the colt that you started, and you're on the loose rein and you have this colt loping out in the pasture on the loose rein and perfectly quiet, and you're like, 40 days ago or 30 days ago nobody had ever been on this horse. And I think this is just, it's priceless. You can't put a price on that. To me, you can't. It's just a feeling it's worth $1 million to me.
Yep, I do know what you mean. The older horses definitely bore me because, like you say, my first trail ride on a horse is usually the 5th or 6th ride. But you get on that horse that's been ridden for 5 years, and all you can say is, well, maybe he lopes a little bit better to a degree that no one can see or appreciate today than he did yesterday. So you do a lot of work for very little progress, but with the colts, it's
exactly
so much every day.
That's the percentage of the progress that you can quantify. When in the beginning the progress are just huge. It's night and day, because like I told you, it's you can't, and then oh, you can. So that's a 100% progress, right? Yep. And then when you start getting into the maneuvers and the fine tuning and the honing of the skills, you have to work so hard, like you said, for progress that is actually very minute. And so maybe I'm too lazy. It bores me. It's not worth it, So I tend to kind of quit, so to speak, on the horse when I have to put the lead change on it. And this is funny because we've had many conversations about this, but I've still not broken this wall. This wall is still there in front of me. I have a friend who's telling me that I have analysis paralysis about it, and she says it's a mental block that you have, and I'm sure she's right, and you would probably tell me the same, but I've still not climbed that peak.
The
And
lead
when
change, you
I
mean?
kind of mess around with the lead change and it doesn't get reliable and I cannot say that I achieved it. And then I kind of pass on the horse to someone else and I say, hey, just fix the lead change and he's good to go, you know, and everything else is pretty much at least decent. I
Mhm.
haven't broken anything, you know.
My favorite place to ride a horse during lead change sessions is out in a big pasture where there's no corner of the arena coming up and you can do real big circles and that kind of thing. And I don't know if you have access to something like that, but it gives you so much more time to accomplish it that it really makes things a lot easier. And if the horse wants to go a little bit fast or gets a little anxiety, you have plenty of room, just let them blow it off and then come back to it or whatever.
Yeah, I used to have access to that, and I did practice lead changes in that setting, and actually it was pretty good. It was probably the best attempts and successes that I've had, you know, in this department. We're in this setting of a very large, you know, pasture, no borders, no fences, no walls, no nothing. But yeah, I tend to when they get that close to being, you know, really pretty well broke, that's when I start to yearn for a really green one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to move on to the next. Yeah. So it makes me very not faithful with horses, and I'm always kind of waiting for the horse of my life, quote unquote, that I'm going to want to keep forever. But I haven't met this guy yet. Maybe the one I have now. I don't know. He seems like a pretty good candidate, but not sure.
What do you want to tell us about him a little bit?
Yeah,
You mentioned him earlier.
I have a 30-month-old, very heavily reining bred pant horse. He's a stud, and that I actually bought him. He was like a week old. You know, I saw him being born on video, and I met him. He was like 4 days old, and I took him here with me when he was 6 months old, and I raised him ever since. So obviously, when you have a horse this young, you have a very strong connection. And he's a pretty special horse. You know, he's the one with the that has a white face and blue eyes, and he's deaf, and yeah, he's a kind of special needs horse, so to speak. But he's a fun guy. He's very gentle. He's like a big puppy dog. You know, he's not even like a horse. But he's a good teacher also. He's an interesting project because being deaf and all, and being, he's a very minus quote unquote horse. You know, Stacy Westfalds talks about minus horses and plus horses. This one, when he's unsure about something or bothered about something, he goes within himself. You know, he gets slower and goes within himself, and he's not like gonna buck or run or spook or shy. You know, he goes, he's like a computer. You know, he becomes slower and slower until he's frozen. So that's a different, it was the first one that I ever had that was like that, and it's been a pretty nice learning curve too.
I've never fooled with a deaf one. I know within the reining bloodlines that definitely is one of those things that's showing up now a lot more. So I'm sure that is a big change.
It is a change, and I think it's very downplayed by the reining industry because it fits their agenda. You know, it fits the reining trainers and breeders agenda because well, those deaf horses, they're all pretty much from that stallion, the Colonel Smoking Gun, aka Gunner, who is the #2 leading sire in the reining industry with, I don't know, $10 million of gains for his offspring or whatever. And so he was bold-faced like that, blue-eye. We believe it's the SW2 or SW1 splash gene who is causing the deafness. And they tend to be very gentle horses, you know, very quiet. Obviously, in the show pen, they're not going to need the earplugs because they can't hear anything. And so they really fit the reining trainer's agenda a lot. And they're very tolerant horses. You can train on them, which is a nice way of saying that you can discipline them and correct them and sometimes be a little harsh with them, and they will take it very well. You know, they're not going to fight back until you really get in there really hard. They're not going to fight back. So of course they're the pets of those trainers because they can train on them pretty hard, and they're also very talented, very athletic. And I think that's why the reining industry has been downplaying this disability, because it's what it is. This horse is missing one of his main sensory inputs, right?
Yeah.
And if you listen to reining breeders and trainers, they're like, oh no, don't do anything different. They're just like any other horse. Well, no, I'm sorry. They're not just like any other horse. When I'm preparing my horse at the barn that I'm at, when I'm preparing saddling up my horse, he's in a shower stall, and he has no view of the main aisle of the barn. He doesn't see what's coming up. Okay. And another horse will hear somebody walking up, either a human or another horse or a wheelbarrow or a tractor or whatever. This horse, I always have to kind of fill in the blanks for him. If I'm wrapping polo wraps around his legs, for example, and I hear somebody coming up the island, I know that this person's going to suddenly appear in his visual field. Well, let me tell you, I stopped wrapping this polo because I don't want my horse to get on top of me all of a sudden, because suddenly he saw this person. So yeah. It's a lie, so it's basically a lie to say, oh no, they're just like any other horse. When you're on the trail and you have a bunch of people on four-wheelers showing up all of a sudden, it's not like any other horse. So you have to kind of work your way around this deafness. And it has its perks too. Hunting season, when it's gunning all over the place, he doesn't hear that. That doesn't bother him. My husband can start the chainsaw next to him. It doesn't bother him, But it has its perks and it has its cons. But I wish the reining industry was a little bit more honest about what it truly is, and that they would say, yeah, we have kept breeding those horses because it works well for us, rather than saying, oh no, it's like any other horse. That I think that it misrepresents the issue a little bit.
I would definitely have some moral conflicts on breeding a horse that had that sort of an issue. But the other thing it brings to mind for me, me with all of my bit stuff, one of the things I talk about is that the tongue is the only part of the body that is involved in 3 of the 5 senses: touch, taste, and smell. And for one of those horses, it's 3 out of 4 senses. So that makes it far and away the most sensory part of the entire body. So I would imagine that the communication and feel that you can get with a horse like that would be heightened, just as like a blind person's hearing would be heightened, the other senses getting stronger. So I'm sure it's quite a change dealing with one of those.
Yeah, again, all the reining trainers, and I've asked a bunch of them, and I'm sure they've been very genuine in their interpretation of it, because they deal with them so much that they're probably so used to it they don't really even think about it anymore. But at my level, owning only one of those, and it's my first one, I did notice, differences. And again, I think it also really, really plays a role in this horse is in a bubble, he's in his own world. He's kind of cut off a lot of sensory input that's not coming to him. And amusingly enough, he moves his ears like a hearing horse, meaning that, his brain patterns is trying to use his ears exactly like a hearing horse does. But I know for a fact he really doesn't hear anything. Like when he was a baby and his mom would call to him, he didn't hear. It was super easy to wean him because she was crying murder, but he was not hearing her, so that was much easier. So he is absolutely deeply deaf, but his ears still work. He will move his ears and search for sound with his ears like a hearing horse, which I think is interesting from a neurology standpoint. But
that was something I hadn't really thought about. But I mean, the ears are one of the biggest body language signals that we get, and so now I kind of want to play with one of those horses just to see if it holds true and his attention really is where his ears are. Or do you find that it does, or are the ears random?
I am guilty of not watching the ears enough, to be honest. I know that I should pay more attention to the ears. The filly that I'm in the process of starting right now, she's teaching me to be more attentive to that, because she's taught me the hard way that when her ears were back in a particular fashion when I was riding her, and her neck was getting higher and her ears were really back, and that it meant that she was getting really, really bothered and just about to kind of become overexposed and have a come apart, to name it. But with him, I don't I don't pay enough attention, I think, to his ears. But one thing I noticed is that he's really using them. He's putting them in different directions, like he's trying to pick up a sound. And I know for a fact he's not picking up any sound. So that's kind of interesting. But the amusing thing is this horse is very quiet, super. Like I said, if he gets concerned about something or worried about something, it really does not show. You have to know him to say, oh, he's becoming slower, So that means that he's going towards freezing. He's not frozen yet, but he's going there. He's on that route.
Mm-hmm.
And the amusing thing is I own another equine that I bought earlier at the beginning of this year, who is a Welsh pony. Okay. And it's a filly, and she's now 18 months old. And I bought her when she was 9 months old. And she's the polar opposite to my Pan Stallion. She is the most extroverted equine I have ever met. I did not even know that such extroverted equines existed. Imagine an Arab plus, I don't even know how to say that, maybe a couple of Arabs multiplied by whatever, plus something else super, super reactive, emotive, and you will have my Welsh filly. And so going from one to the other, it's kind of a cultural shock every time I switch. It's not she's not for the faint of heart, definitely.
Uh-huh. Claire, we've come to our first commercial break. I need to bring up our sponsor for this episode.
Oh, please do.
And
please do.
Since you are a lady, we've got one that caters to ladies. So this episode is sponsored by Panama Sport Breast Collars. Panama Sport Breast Collars is owned by the same parent company that brought you the original banana hammock. Panama Sport Breast Collars know where a lady equestrians sweat with their patent-pending airflow and hay reduction designs. Panama Breast Collars has your equine obsession fully supported. Panama Sport Breast Collars for ladies, available in sizes mini through heavy draft.
Okay, do I get a coupon for one? Because I definitely could use one.
I wish that they existed. There's a marketing opportunity there for somebody. I think sponsors is my favorite part of this whole podcast thing.
Yeah, well, this one's a great one.
So, well, a little more on the philosophical side of things. Would you consider yourself an experimenter within the training of a horse? Are you kind of willing to try anything just to see what happens?
Absolutely, as you well know, because you've had me trying stuff that I was not game to try if it were not for you. Yeah,
you definitely are willing to step out of your comfort zone. Yep.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I think horses, they learn a lot by trial and error, right? And I think humans too, and we have to try. And one of the highlights of my equestrian life was the day that I met Joe Walter.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, I always wanted to meet Joe, and in 2018 I got the opportunity to travel to the UK. He was giving a clinic there, and I was able to go there, and so I was able to talk with him quite a bit. That was really it was a great experience. He's a fantastic gentleman.
Really
and I asked him, and I said if you could kind of sum up everything you know about horses in one sentence, what would it be? And he was gracious enough to give me not one answer, but two. He said the number one thing is be in the moment, be present, which I fully agreed with. And he said the second thing is don't be afraid to experiment. Just try, because he said if you're not happy with the outcome that you have anyway, I mean, what's the risk? Why not try something else? If what you get does not make you perfectly happy, why not try something else? So yes, I'm a great believer in experimenting, and I experiment a whole lot of sometimes really weird and crazy ideas. I think my horsemanship is like a pendulum that I go, to one extreme, and then I swing back to the other extreme, and then sometimes I tend to be into really cuckoo stuff about I don't know the spiritual connection we have with horses or whatever, and then I want to be, and then I'm like, oh no, I went too far this way, and now I want to be like about bits and spurs, and kind of get them going and get after it, and la la la, and then I'm like, oh no, that was too harsh, and my horse is always telling me, you're getting colder or you're getting warmer, this works for me or that doesn't work for me, and they keep me where I need to be. But I do experiment a lot. Absolutely.
In the spirit of experimentation, I have two other questions. One, can you name some unexpected thing that you learned with experimenting, something that did not go the way you expected it to go?
Oh, yeah. I wish you would have asked me in advance, because I would have to. There are examples, but they don't come up to my mind right away. So,
Okay.
yeah, I wish I've
That's
known
okay.
about that. I
We can
could have
circle
thought
back
about it.
to it. Yeah, no big deal. Secondly, do you have a spectacular failure that you can recall that just you tried something and it just blew up in your face?
I've had quite a few. Yeah, I've had quite a few spectacular failures. Yeah, I had a few like a month and a half ago with that one filly that I'm starting now. I'm almost, I can almost say she's done, because now she's gotten so much better. But it was right, I don't know, maybe number 6, 7, whatever, and I was in the round pen, and I'm like, okay, well, she's, and she was very reluctant to trot the first session. She was like, grabbing her butt and like, oh no, I can't do that. This is too scary. And finally, I kind of coaxed her into, trotting, and I actually took her on the trail at the walk, but still I took her on the trail a couple of times, and she was doing kind of okay, So I'm in the round pen, and I'm like, okay, now she's good to go, and I'm gonna ask her for the lope. And I did not I did not pay enough attention to her ears, namely, and her just her general demeanor. And the first stride of lope that she took was not an actual stride of lope. It was just a stride of going all over the place, and I had sand in my mouth because I could before I could tell.
Mm-hmm.
So that was not really it was
there's
not really an experiment, though. If you want an experiment, the first time I tried to lay down my sorrel gelding that you coached me about for quite a bit of time. I had a solid pen gelding that I bought when he was a 2-year-old, and I started with your help, actually. And at some point I wanted to lay him down, and I tried, and I saw the underneath of his belly from a really, really close up. I remember distinctly seeing the veins going on his belly, and I'm like, if I can see those veins, I'm probably too close to the underneath of this horse. And next thing I know, he's flopping on the ground like a fish. He fell because he reared up really high and then fell miserably. And so that didn't work. And it took me like what was it, like 5 years before you motivated me to try it again with a better how to and step-by-step approach. And the next laydown that I tried was a complete success. It was wonderful, and we've done it several times ever since. And the last time I led that filly down for actually I had my sister visiting from Mexico, and I said, oh, let me show you something cool. And the filly went down in like 15 seconds, and there was no fight whatsoever. It was like a maneuver. It was like, oh yeah, I know. And she went down. That was beautiful. Mm-hmm. So you see, that's the proof. You need to keep at it. And I love to take before and after pictures of me getting bucked off of a horse, and me riding this same horse a couple of weeks or month later, and say, you see, then he was not ready, and now he's ready, because you got to keep at it.
Yeah. Got to do the work for sure. Well, as a profession, you are now a saddle trader, but also a saddle fitter. So would you like to get into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And you played a part in that too, because you had some very, very cool observations when I was not aware of saddle fit, and I knew nothing about that. You had some pretty good observations. So I have to thank you for that. I've always been really, really in love with the saddle. When you ask me in the beginning of the podcast if I had one particular horsey, equestrian, whatever item that I really liked, and I told you it's my saddle. So the
Mhm.
saddle as a it's a tool, but it's also, I think it's a beautiful object. I think it's very interesting and can be fascinating when it's a nice one. And so I was buying Western saddles like some other ladies collect, shoes or purses. I'm really not very interested in shoes or purses, but Western saddles, yeah, that made me tick. So I started buying them for my own use and pleasure. And then one led to the second one, and then the third, and then the fourth, and then I was addicted. So I started really collecting them and having a lot and trying to get more knowledgeable about them. And I ended up having so many that I was selling them to buy some more. And at some point, somebody told me, you should think about doing that professionally. And because I was in that employment rut that I was mentioning earlier, I said, well, let's go for it. And then I realized there was a real niche market that is extremely hungry for saddles. And now my company is in its 4th year of existence, and we are having a very big expansion at the moment. And if I had twice or 3 times as many saddles as I have for sale, they would definitely be sold. So there is a very big demand for quality used saddles on the market. And the bonus that, unlike some other traders that just sell the saddle, I kind of sell the analysis and the expertise in saddle fitting with them. So I send them to the customers who have a certain time window to try them on, and they send me photos and videos of their horses and stuff under certain angles. And I ask them, I have a process that I ask them to do with their horses and ride them like this and like that. And with all this data collected, I advise them whether they should keep it or not. Of course, the final decision is entirely theirs, but they have this expertise that they are not alone in their purchase.
Can you define that process for us a little bit? What are you
Yeah,
looking
absolutely.
for
Yeah,
or not
absolutely.
wanting to see? Or
No, definitely. The first thing is to put the saddle on the horse with bareback, without a pad, in the proper position, which is with the front of the bar right behind the scapula of the horse, because we all naturally tend to put the saddle too far forward,
I'm
which is the
about to
one
do a
remark that you
video
had
on
for
that.
me a couple of years ago, and I slid that saddle back, and I was like, oh, Daniel is right. Works much better like that. So because you can have the best saddle in the world, if you put it in the wrong place, it's not going to work. I can have the best shoes in the world. If I put them on my head, they're not going to work for me. It's the same thing. The saddle has to be in the proper position. That's the number one thing. So I asked them to put the saddle on the horse's back without a pad and have pictures made for me. It's basically 45-degree angle from the front, 45 from the back, full front, full back, profile. And I kind of look at how the saddle lays on the horse. I try to use my laser eyes and see the bars of the tree on that horse's back. Then I have them doing the same thing with the pad and the cinch done. And then I tell them they need to ride their horse, because the horse is going. I'm going to give my technical opinion on a static situation, but the horse is a moving animal, and you don't. Then I ask them to ride their horse, and so what you have to judge is how is the horse moving forward, the quality of his stride, how far does he reach with his front feet, how well does he bring his hind underneath, is he bobbing his head, where are his ears, how does he look when you put the saddle on. All those, I tell the people that the horse needs to be the judge. The final decision should belong to the horse, because he's the one who knows how he feels in the saddle. As the saddle move between the beginning and the end of your session, that kind of thing. And no later than last week, a lady's customer, she sends me pictures, and the saddle is sitting really nice on the horse's back, except to me it's just a little bit narrow. So the angle of the bars looks good, but to me I'm like, the gullet would need to be a little bit wider. I'm afraid the horse is a very well built quarter horse, is muscular, and in the pictures I'm like, I think it's going to be a little tight. And I ask her to go through all that process, and she tells me, she's amazed. The horse has never been that comfortable. He's never moved out that well for her. He's never been that, sensitive to her cues and her seat and everything. So from the pictures alone, I would have told her, I don't think so. We should look for another one. But our horse told her a completely different story. So you have to ultimately listen to the horse.
I agree. I kind of, at least here in the US, saddle fit in the last 3 or 4 years has really exploded with the saddle fitters, the professionals. And I think it might even be a little overdone at this point because of what you were talking about before. I think that there is a level of good enough that you're going to hit, but it really does depend on how you're going to use the horse and how they're going to move their back. So the same saddle may well be fine for this exercise, but might hinder the horse a little bit in this other exercise. So I really don't know that there is such thing as a perfect fit for a horse. I think it's a little more dependent on what that horse is going to do. And then we might have a horse that's a little fatter in the summer, a little leaner in the winter. So like personally, I have about 6 saddles that I use, and I tend to think of them as fitting certain types. So like I have a saddle that fits kind of long, narrow backed horses, and another one that fits short, thicker horses and so forth. And that's more how I think about it. I'm also in a position where I have to ride a lot of horses. If I was only riding one, I may be a little bit more looking for that unicorn saddle that was perfect for that horse, but I don't know that it exists with my experience anyway. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm very, very glad you asked the question and you mentioned this, because this is one of my big, big things. First of all, you say, that saddle fitting has known a really big rise in the past couple of years. And you said it may be going a little bit overboard at the moment. I fully agree with that, and this is this pendulum thing again. And I could go into a lot of things that are not horse related about that. We hit one extreme and then we're like, oh no, we realize that we've been doing something wrong for a long, long time. So we want to correct that, but we tend to swing this pendulum too far the other way. And so I think that's exactly what's happening with saddle fitting at the moment, is that because people finally realized that they were maybe hindering their horses with ill-fitting saddles, now they want to see every problem through the prism of saddle fitting. Mm-hmm. And because of that, so when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So if they have this in their head, oh, maybe my saddle doesn't fit, so maybe that's why my horse doesn't, I can catch my horse in the pasture, or my horse won't pick up the correct lead for me, or my horse doesn't stay tied up or whatever. And the saddle may play a part in all of this, but maybe not, so you cannot look at everything through the prism of saddle fitting. We really need to have a really holistic approach to horses. I think we have to be aware of everything and keep everything also in moderation and not become extreme about anything. That's the first point. The second point I keep telling my customers is, do not look for a perfect fit, because how often do we find anything perfect in life? Not pretty often, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, except my husband, doesn't happen much, right? Perfection is kind of few in between. Uh-huh. So I tell my customers, do not obsess over getting that perfect fit. There is what I call an optimum fit, which is a close to perfect fit. And as you mentioned, it may even vary for one given horse between summer and winter. For example, a lot of horses tend to be a little fatter in the summer and a little leaner in the winter, but I also know horses where it's turned upside down. They're actually bigger in the winter and thinner in the summer, but there are some variations even within the same horse. So mm-hmm. The perfect fit, I don't really believe in that. If you're really, really lucky, you're going to find an optimum fit, but that's not what people should aim for. People should aim for a functional fit. I think that's really what we need to look at. So like on the scale of 0 to 100, if you are around 80% that of good green marks in your pro column, if you have 2, you have pros and cons. If you have 80% of green checks in your in your pros column, then the saddle is good for you to keep. You shouldn't, discard it because you have 20% that are not perfect and that could be otherwise different. That's my approach to it anyway, because I've noticed that some people tend to obsess over it, and then, like I said, they want to crystallize all the issues they may have with their horse under the light of saddle fitting, and that's really not doing the horse a favor, and that's not doing your saddle fitter a favor either.
It's not just that, it's every fad that comes along and I don't know if the fads are the same in Europe as they are here, but I'll say about 10 years ago, this natural barefoot trimming thing really took off. And I have a customer that went to a weekend deal and learned how to trim her own horse. And all of a sudden, if he didn't go to the left as well as she thought, she would have to go back to the trailer and grab a rasp and whittle on his hoof a little bit, because she was sure that it was an imbalance in his hoof that was causing that. And just like you said, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So
exactly. I was about to repeat that. I was about to say, well, that's the hammer / nail, concept but it's a natural thing. And I think we do have the same fads. So we had the saddle fitting thing, we have the barefoot thing, and most of my horses are barefoot. So I'm really not, I try to be extremely open-minded about everything, because I think it really depends on the horse, the owner, the terrain that they're going to ride in. My young stud, for example, he's very ouchy. He has sensitive feet. We have a gravel courtyard that he has to cross to go from his pasture to the barn. And before he was shod, he was very ouchy on his feet, always crossing this courtyard. Ever since I've had him shod, and he has very, very thin, lightweight racing shoes in the front, he's absolutely fine crossing this courtyard. So that was the right thing for him to do, but all my previous horses were barefoot, except when I go to a reining competition or a reining clinic, or I want to school a little bit further, I'm going to have sliders put in the back, but that's not a permanent thing in my horses. So I'm all for the barefoot thing when the horses are comfortable in their feet. And if they're not, and they need to be helped with a pair of shoes, so be it. I think we need to be very adaptable and open-minded. And I am so scared by the people who tend to be closed-minded, and it's almost like a sect. It's like the positive reinforcement people, for example.
Yeah,
they scare me to death. They scare me to absolute death, because all of a sudden, and they don't even realize that horses with one another, with a herd mate, with a pasture mate, whatever, they use negative reinforcement all the time. They don't go around giving each other carrots. That doesn't make sense. Yeah. So we do have this fad at the moment, and I love positive reinforcement. I love it. It has saved my relationship with my Welsh filly, because it was the thing that was right for her. But if I try to do it with my deaf horse, that doesn't work, because I don't have a bridge signal for him to know that the treat is coming, Mm-hmm. And the 3-year-old filly that I'm starting at the moment, it doesn't work very well for her, because she's happy to take a treat if she's relaxed. But the minute that she's worried, and she's worried very easily, she doesn't want that treat anymore. So again, it's everything in moderation. We have to be open-minded to all kind of technique and approaches, but people who are really, really set in their ways and don't want to look outside of their own box scare me.
Yeah, I agree. I have seen some horses. I've used positive reinforcement with horses myself. One of the concerns I have with it is that food works on a very primitive circuit, and it is very easy to change dominance hierarchies without recognizing it if you're not very experienced. So I kind of believe that positive reinforcement training in horses is not something that novice people should do, because I have definitely seen them take average horses and turn them dangerous in short order without meaning to, or really realizing that they did. I completely agree. The holistic view is much better. Yep.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And again, I think it's a fantastic tool. I really use it, at least partially, with all of my horses. Interestingly, my 2-year-old stud, so I don't do positive reinforcement with him because he's deaf. So obviously there is no deaf, bridge signal, but I do hand feed him a lot of treats for various things. He has never tried to bite at all. He's not mouthy at all. You would think that a 2-year-old stud that is regularly hand fed would be, a nightmare, that he would, nip and bite and be mouthy. Not at all. And my Welsh filly, who is extremely extroverted and tended to be very nippy in the beginning, ever since and with her, I do a lot of positive reinforcement because that was really a lifesaver with her. Well, ever since I've started, she has gotten way less mouthy and doesn't nip anymore. Because she's learned how to properly take the food from you in a certain position and with respect, and there are certain rules, so that really helped her. But you have to know what you're doing. And I think, like you said, it's really not for novice people, and it's very, very easy to create monsters with that. So fantastic tool, but for certain things, it really depends on in what hands you put that.
Yeah, like everything else, it can be the proper tool for the right horse at the right time. Just like most of my horses are barefoot as well, but then there are times when shoes are appropriate or even necessary if we're trying to accomplish certain things, like the Malinois. Once again, you give a novice dog person a high drive Malinois and you teach them a little bit about positive reinforcement, that is probably going to blow up in their face in short order.
Yeah, probably.
So
yeah.
Can
Most
be the
likely
same with some horses. So, all right, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but is there any particular thing that you wish you had known at the start of all of this horse stuff? A little conversation, I guess you have the opportunity with your daughter, but what would you go back and tell the 13-year-old Claire about horses that she needs to know down the road?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I would tell her to not do unto others what she wouldn't like done unto her. And that is because that is the lead, that's really the lead concept of my horsemanship today. It's that there are some tools, and by tools, I don't mean physical tools. I mean, in a conceptual way, there are some tools that I will not have in my box. So that makes my progress slower. And for example, there are things that I cannot, achieve. But then the relationship with my horse comes first. And I think, again, we mentioned briefly show horses that we see going around that have good results. There are great athletes and everything, but we know that they're not very mentally sound, right? So I would tell her to never compromise the mental well-being and the relationship for one particular maneuver or one particular result. And I think, mistreatment and abuse and are real big issues in the horse industry. And again, this is going to come and bite us in the ass when all the animal protection groups are going to want to keep us from doing what we love, because they will have good examples to show of what we collectively have been doing to horses for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, we're sawing the branch on which we're sitting because we've not been kind of policing and monitoring what the industry as a whole has been doing for years. So now we've given real reasons to the public to think that we shouldn't be allowed to do what we do.
I completely agree. And I
that's
think
a big concern.
Yeah, part of the cults that you were talking about earlier, we are attacking ourselves from within. I'm always very, very leery of these people that get to the line of claiming abuse. There are definitely barefoot zealots here in the U.S. that will claim that putting shoes on a horse is abusive. There are people of other riding bits is abusive, and we're giving ammunition to our enemies that they're going to use to try to end the whole deal here before.
That's exactly what I mean. But the problem is it's because shoes and bits and spurs and stuff are material thing that you can show to people who don't know, who have no knowledge. while the mental welfare of a horse is very hard to demonstrate. It's hard to explain to people who are not really into it that horses need turnout time, they need social interaction with each other, that kind of thing. And you can, if you keep a horse in a box stall and it's not shod and it's ridden without a bit, it can still be miserable and mentally abused, you know, but you're not going to be able to materially show it to people who don't know. So it's very tricky. It's very, very tricky, but abuse has been rampant in this industry for as long as I can remember. And we've always kind of, you know, wanted to sweep it under the rug, and that's going to come and bite us in the ass for sure.
Well, I believe that the cure for all of that is education. And so that's my approach to it. But you also, like, to recognize abuse and that body language of a horse does require an expert. That's one of the things where when I see someone that really doesn't know horses claiming abuse, I kind of want to say, you know, you don't know enough to know whether that is or not. But on the flip side of it, you also have some of the dogmatic traditions that need to die, and the experts in those areas are so desensitized to seeing that body language. I'll give the example here with dressage, and you've seen the bit DVD, the whole saying that a foamy mouth is a wet mouth and a wet mouth is a good mouth.
Jesus, yes,
And
absolutely.
If anybody has seen my stuff, I think I've pretty thoroughly debunked that. But that statement of mine that a foamy mouth is not a good thing would be considered heresy in dressage. They really have morphed the body language around to be misreading it and thinking that one thing indicates something that it in fact in no way indicates. And so that's a balancing act. I would never go so far as to say that a foamy mouth indicates abuse, but I would certainly say that it indicates that there are some problems there that we could improve upon and make the horse more comfortable and happier. And that's kind of the way I approach it. But I would never attack them hard enough to give PETA ammunition to use against all of us anyway.
No, certainly. But you know, I mentioned a love/hate relationship with reining earlier on. And maybe less so in the U.S. I think in the U.S. it's either gotten better over the past 20 years. I don't know, but reining in Europe, it's pretty infamous. You look at the horses and their facial expressions, the way they carry their ears, the wrinkles around their eyes, the way their nostrils are working, their mouth, just the face, not to mention the fact that a lot of them are still loping with their face between their knees, you know, but
that's still rampant here, unfortunately.
And you can tell they're miserable, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. But because those horses are winning and those people are wearing those, you know, shiny jackets, and the public is like hooray and bravo and all of that, and it's real, and in some cases it's really disgusting. So on the other hand, like those groups, they can really hurt, you know, what we're passionate about. But at the same time, they have a motive for existing, because because mistreatment is a real thing, unfortunately. So it's a very, very tricky issue.
Well, we'll both take a deep breath and back away from beating the dead horse, so to speak. I'm going to invite, I know you're a very active learner, and I've been privileged to be a part of that journey, but I'm going to ask you of some other resources, and I'll just tell you here, feel free to mention other clinicians. I know you follow a few of them. Don't hesitate to give out their information or whatever that won't offend me in any way, shape, or form. So what are some of your favorite resources for improving your horsemanship?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have watched, like I told you earlier, I have watched literally thousands of hours of videos and you know, and clinic bits, and I have all the DVDs and books, and you know, I'm certainly a very good customer, all of that. there is one guy in particular that you may not be very, very popular in the US. He certainly is popular in Europe, but I think he's English born, but he lives in the Netherlands. And his name is Tristan Tucker. And he has a system called the TRT method, I think, TRT, whatever. Uh-huh. And the guy is a dressage, pretty high level dressage rider, but he has one of the best approaches that is, to me, extremely balanced between, the mental health of the horse and the biomechanics. And so Tristan Tucker is certainly a very, very interesting guy to look into.
Pretty humorous too, isn't he?
I'm sorry?
Pretty humorous too, isn't he?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You guys have that in common. Absolutely. Yeah.
I like his deal pretty well. If he's the future of dressage, I can kind of take a deep breath and relax a little bit. So
yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. My favorite Reiner would absolutely be Andrea Fapani. So it's not very hard because he's like pretty much number one in the world at the moment. So that's not a very difficult choice.
For the last 20 minutes.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting. I think it's probably someone who has evolved quite a bit in his approach to horses. I think Andrea is probably 40, 46, 48, something like that. He's been in the industry since he was probably a teenager. And I would be curious to have a long, deep conversation with him and learn about the changes that he went through regarding all the things we just mentioned, because I think he probably has gone through quite a bit of changes regarding that type of thing.
I have him
Stacy
on my
Westfall.
Yeah, I have.
Oh
him.
yeah, well
so I don't know if I'll actually get him or not, but we'll see. I'll try.
Yeah, well, that would be fabulous. That would be absolutely fabulous. Stacy Westfall, of course, is always a very sure. Stacy and her husband. I think they're very, very genuine people, also striking a very good balance between performance and, and welfare and ethics. So, pretty good. Warwick Schiller, of course, has been quite instrumental in me getting, better and more skills. And he would be a very interesting person to talk to as well. He has quite an interesting journey, actually, because he was very performance oriented, in the beginning, and he says himself that he went down a rabbit hole, and now he's very, very versed in psychology and neurology and even psychiatry applied to horses. So that could be an interesting person to talk to as well.
He and Stacy are both on my list. Once again, I don't.
Okay, fabulous.
I'll get them, but I do actually have a contact in common with Warwick now, so I may be able to get that door open, but we'll see.
Very cool. And I am a personal friend of a lady in South Dakota who's into a barrel. She's a colt starter by profession, and she's a good level competitor in barrel racing. She's actually at the World Show at the moment. And her name is Becky Emio. I don't know if you're familiar with her, from South Dakota. And you may want to have a chat with her too. She's a pretty cool lady.
Okay.
Badass, but cool.
I like badass ladies. That's a good thing. They don't intimidate me at all. So that's great.
So yeah, I think that's about it. There are a lot I've looked into. I mean, Clinton Anderson, love him or hate him, but he certainly is one hell of a horseman. He has namely, and it's free to see on the internet. He has some videos working with sucklings, like tiny baby foals, couple of days old, and introducing pressure and release to those babies. It's a thing of beauty to watch. And when I watched that, I was like, I don't know what I think of it. I don't know if I think it's terrible, or I don't know if I think it's amazing. And I think it's a little bit of both, but it's like what we mentioned before. It's something that you don't want to touch if you're not an expert horseman, but the way he does it, that's amazing. And he has those babies like doing sophisticated moves and being absolutely fabulously educated by the age of like 4 or 5 months. It's crazy, you know. But again, you need to be Clinton Anderson to do that. I wouldn't try it. Yeah, he's a complex persona. He's a complex character, but I think he's pretty darn interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely a level of things that I experiment with that I'm not gonna show the world, because the misapplication of it would be disastrous. So I always flirt with that line. Everything I present is kind of old stuff to me for the most part. But anyway.
Well, yeah, there's a real issue with that, you know, because the internet has all this very, very positive, impact that, like we said, we can share information, we can meet from other parts of the world. I mean, we're having this conversation. You're in Louisiana, I am in France. It's crazy, okay?
Mhm.
But then you also have all the negatives. Like, like I was telling you, I make those little clips just to show my customer and my, followers base that, oh, do this like that, or this is, maybe you should look at this with your horse, maybe you could do that. And you will always have, the armchair quarterback is not touching your horse much in their daily life, and they will come and nail you, and they will come and criticize and lash at you like, oh, you did this wrong, and oh, you're tying up your horse with a rope halter, or you're evil, whatever. So it's kind of tiresome to always have to look for the bad, the negative stuff that the people are going to pick at, when all you're trying to do is actually bring information and be informative and try to help people and their horses. Dealing with that kind of negative, I think it gets old.
It's a little different. That really wasn't what I didn't mean I don't show it because I'm afraid of the trolls. It's more like you say, with Clinton in there with a foal, his timing and the speed with which he can read a horse and react to it and all is what allows him to get away with stuff. And there's lots of stuff that I can get away with that I know most people can't. And that's what I don't want them to try. You know what I mean? I think that it would have an overall negative effect, even without the trolls that want to come in. And that. Yeah, I don't get a whole lot of that, but I get enough of it that it surprises me from time to time, the stuff complete. I had a lady leave a review on a deal claiming that I'd done some stuff to a horse of hers and so forth. I've never met the lady or ridden a horse for her. It was a total fabrication. I mean, just completely like, where does someone get enough hate for a total stranger that they're going to make up an entire story of it? There's some mind-blowing people out there, but I guess that's just the world we live in.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Absolutely.
Final question. What does success with horses mean to you? What is that picture of all of it coming together look like?
Well, it could look like competing with decent success. That doesn't necessarily meaning winning, but competing and not making an absolute fool of yourself. It could look like that, but only if the horse is relaxed through it all. I mean, only if the horse is like, I'm okay with it, and not having this gone look in its eye. And then, because I don't compete much, I compete a little bit. I try to, but then competitions for Western here are not, of course, as popular as my daughter will be into show jumping, for example. It's going to be very, very easy for her to progress with that, because she will start with tiny level competition and then a little bit more. And if she was into dressage, that would be the same. But here, if you ride Western, we have very, very few low-level local shows. We don't have access to a lot of that. So I don't get to do a lot of that. So success would be just, having a really good session with my horse, that the maneuvers are really, easy, and he feels good, and he's super soft, and he weights nothing. He's weightless, and he's super pliable and super soft. And I don't feel like I have to push or pull. Everything happens just kind of in harmony, and it weights nothing. That would be success.
I understand exactly what you mean. And something you said there is causing me to lie to you. I have one more question. So we said the picture, and that reminds me that you are a shutterbug. So do you have any photography tips for somebody that might want to take a picture or video of their horse? One of those hard learned lessons that you might save someone some heartache.
Yeah, I realize we've completely overlooked that. Oh crap! Yeah, yeah, that's an entire whole world in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't be cheap. That's my one advice. It's and it works for everything. Don't be cheap for your horse. Don't be cheap for your trainer. Don't be cheap for your saddle, and do not be cheap for your photography. It's the lens. It's not the camera. It's the lens. Buy the baddest, biggest, fastest lens money can buy, or you can buy, and then do your homework and learn how to use your camera. Read the manual. Read the manual. Fast glass 2.8. If you want to make good pictures of horses, pick what we call a fast aperture lens, meaning that it's going to let a lot of light into your lens, and the more light, the best you're going to be able to freeze action and make sharp pictures. But truly now, knowledge is free. The internet is your friend. YouTube is your friend. There is an entire YouTube sphere about photography. It's enormous. The number of reviewers and tutorials and everything about photography on the internet is nearly endless. All you need is your effort. So buy a good lens and invest your time and effort, do your homework, and you will make great pictures.
One thing I'll say on that too is when I was in college, I was actually seriously dating a girl was a photography major. And that was still in the time of film. And so she would go take 24 pictures and then have to go spend an hour and a half in a darkroom developing all of that. And just imagine the advent of digital photography and how you can go take 1,000 pictures and immediately delete 700 of them, and all of the time that it saves now just to have digital photography and Photoshop and all of the gifts that stuff is versus the old expensive way of having to do it.
Absolutely, because it allows for trial and error. Digital photography, like you said, you just try, just push that shutter. It doesn't cost anything. Once you've bought the camera, just click it, and now you even have mirrorless technology that you see the picture you're gonna get even before you press the shutter. So, like I said, really the most important part of your rig is your lens. Invest more in your lens than you would in your camera body. And go to the internet and learn. This is priceless. Or take photography courses. Get a local coach. For probably $25 or $30 an hour, you can have an actual human being showing you the ins and outs of your camera, and that's going to help you tremendously. It's like horsemanship. Nobody can do it in your place. You have to be there. Day after day after day. You have a bad day with your horse, go back the next day, because your horse will have forgiven you in the meantime, because they don't bear a grudge. And just invest your time and go and do it over and again, and that's the only way to improve.
Well, very good, Claire. I have to say I have enjoyed this tremendously. Even though we've known each other 7 years, I guess this is the first voice conversation and certainly the longest conversation we've ever had. And I think this was just a fantastic podcast. I certainly appreciate your time.
It was a great experience. It was the first podcast that I've had the honor of being on. I'm still wondering what I did to deserve the privilege of being on it, but it was very cool. And thank you for having me on. And sure, let me know when it's available, and I'll listen back to it with a lot of pleasure.
I certainly will. All right. Well, everybody, that has been episode 5 of Adult Onset Horsemanship. Thank you much. Please give us a little comment or a review if you can on whichever app you're listening to this on, and we'll see you for the next one.